For thousands of years, a legend has remained hidden.
There's this one night I can remember, where at night, all you could hear were the howls and the screams that just came echoing from the woods.
Of a beast that only lives in folklore.
I turned around, and that's when Bigfoot, Sasquatch, whatever you want to call it, walked out of myth and into reality.
A creature believed to be the missing link between humans and apes.
I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that what I was looking at that day was not a human.
Are these animals real, or a part of our imagination? Find out right here on Sasquatch Diaries.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the very first ever pilot episode of Sasquatch Diaries podcast ever. Thank you so much for listening and joining me. I am your host, Gus G, and I'm coming to you live from the beautiful city of Calgary, Alberta, Canada. So let me tell you a little bit about this podcast and why we're different and what you can expect. This is a podcast dedicated to people who want to tell their stories completely anonymously. Even me, your host, is anonymous. My real name is Gus G. I have another legal name, but just for the purpose of our viewers and for our listeners and for our future participants, I want to remain anonymous as well. And this allows me to say whatever I want, as loud as I want, in a totally respectful way, obviously. I mean, dealing with this kind of thing, people are definitely entitled to their beliefs, and they can say and do whatever they want. And it's not meant to be a weapon of any sort. This is just a way, like a safe space for people who have had encounters and who have had sightings or do have stories to tell, where they can share that anonymously, because we live in a world right now where people survive solely on hard, concrete, factual evidence. And obviously, I mean, that's the right way of going about things. But sometimes, there's situations where things do happen, and because you don't have any physical proof or concrete-esque proof, I should say, it's your word is worth nothing. So that's what this podcast is meant to do. So my ultimate goal by starting this podcast is to create awareness that these creatures are in fact real. You can expect a new diary entry every week where we'll have a guest interviewed where they will tell their story of their encounter or their sighting or their a story, for example, that had been shared by a relative or a friend or what have you. So now let me talk a little bit about my connection to Sasquatch. So I had a Class B encounter twice in my life. So when I say Class B encounter, I say I heard a vocalization. And this was back in the summer of 2008. I'm originally from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, and I had a friend in Winnipeg. I was about 15, I believe, 14 or 15 years old, and he invited me on this camping trip to the Experimental Lakes area, which is about 2 hours north of Kenora, Ontario. 20 minutes, I want to say, maybe half an hour, northwest, I believe, of Kenora, Ontario, Canada. So we had gone and, back then I had, had heard of Bigfoot, and I didn't really kind of give it any thought, to be completely honest. So I guess you could say I was a skeptic. Excuse me. I was definitely a skeptic, and at the time I I had a feeling, I had a weird feeling going into this trip. And I can't remember what night it was exactly. It might have been the first or the second night we were out there. But I remember waking up and there was light rain and some lightning going on. And I was in my tent and I woke up. Oh man, I don't even know what time. Maybe 1, 2, 3 in the morning, give or take. And I just remember hearing this wailing, kind of like a woman, it was definitely a female-esque, like Sasquatch call, essentially. And I had no idea what that was, and it freaked me out. I mean, you're 15 years old, and you're in your own tent by yourself in the middle of the woods, and you hear this weird noise. The heck is that, So I remember going home from that camping trip and coming home. And I came home and I remember doing some research on YouTube. I had searched and searched and searched. And through this research, I discovered that there was a bunch of different animal noises that you could find on YouTube. So this was in, like I said, 2008. So I remember going home and listening to moose calls, mountain lion, bear, owl, eagle, all the stuff that's native to that part of northwestern Ontario, Canada. And nothing came up. And then I heard a Bigfoot call that literally made me jump out of my chair. It was so similar. I got goosebumps, the hair on my neck raised, like just the whole cliche kind of thing that you've all heard. But I heard something, and it sounded eerily similar. Now, unfortunately, that video I saw back in 2008, I didn't save it. I don't remember the name of the title. I'd search and search and search for it. But I did find a similar video from 2013, and that had the call in it that was, again, eerily similar. So I'm going to play that for you, and this calling, or these vocalizations went on for about 2 to 2.5 minutes, maybe 3. They were very brief, but I remember hearing them distinctly, and they were far-ish away, maybe 4 or 5 kilometers away, but it felt like they were farther. And just where we were on a small island, and it was definitely off the island. But I remember, I guess hearing those vocalizations and them bouncing off the water, that definitely played a part in it. So I was surprised, I was really surprised at how fast sound travels. So I just listened to it. I just listened to it for the entirety, and then it stopped, and I remember going back to sleep. So I'm going to play this clip, and I'll let you guys be the judge. So that was my, I guess you could say, first encounter with Sasquatch. And I'll never forget it as long as I live. And that's kind of what sparked my interest. And then a few weeks ago, I unfortunately lost my grandfather. And coincidentally, while I was at home for his funeral, I was sitting down with my grandmother. And I was talking to her, and she was reminiscing about how I had just moved from Winnipeg to Calgary this past September, and she was reminiscing about how her honeymoon with my grandfather was in Banff, Alberta, which is about an hour and a half west of Calgary. So, I kind of internalized that, and I was like, oh, that's pretty interesting. And then, not last weekend, but the weekend before that, I went to Kananaskis, which is a part, it's just the beginning of the Rocky Mountains here in Alberta, heading into, bordering on the border of, towards the border of British Columbia. So I went there, and I went to have, I guess, you could say, I just like a small picnic and on a small hike. And I took a can of beer with me, and I started, going up the mountain. I found this great overlook of this lake and this small valley. And so I kind of just set up shop there, and I had a sandwich with me and a beer. And I, sentimentally cheersed the beer to my grandfather, who had just passed away. And right in that split second, I heard a similar, whooping noise almost. And it was brief. It stopped me dead in my tracks, because I had heard these similar sounds before coming from these animals, or possible Bigfoot calls, I guess you could say. I remember hearing them, and I was surprised. I was so surprised and shocked, because, it was something that, kind of re-sparked my imagination and my love for Sasquatch and the unknown and cryptids in general right then and there. And I had always wanted to do something that I love, and talking about this and interviewing people is just a dream of mine. So it was kind of like an epiphany almost. It was like me going out there and dedicating something to my grandfather, and then having this spark of, I guess you could say, destiny or creativity pushing me to create this podcast is what really did it and set it over the edge for me. So I went home, and here we are. But that call, it just was shocking. And I have another clip as well that's very similar to this one. And it was brief. It was kind of faint. And so was this video recording. But I'm going to play it for you. And it's fairly similar. Not spot on, obviously, but fairly similar. So here we go. Wow. There it is. So that is I'm going to let you guys be the judge. And I don't know who's listening. I don't know if we'll have any listeners at this point. It's very early in the game, but I want to thank you for listening and just coming out here and having some fun with me. It's a real pleasure to be talking about this and to be spending time, interviewing people who have had encounters and telling their stories, and doing it in a place where they're not going to be judged at all, is awesome. So I want to thank you again for listening, and we hope to see you back next week. Please like and subscribe. We have an Instagram account, Sasquatch Diaries podcast. We also have a Facebook group, Sasquatch Diaries podcast as well, just on Facebook. Eventually we're going to, kind of get the ball rolling, but this is the beginning. So give yourself a pat on the back, and know that I am sincerely grateful for you listening, and for clicking like and hitting the subscribe button. It really means a lot to me. So thank you again, and I hope to see you next week. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Sasquatch Diaries podcast. If you like what you heard, hit like and subscribe button. Don't forget to come back next week, where we'll have a new entry. And remember, If you or someone you know had an encounter and would like to share it on our show, contact Sasquatch Diaries
Podcast
at gmail.com.